The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on the 28th of June by Serbian nationalists was the spark that led the great European powers down the path to war. German forces entered Belgium on the 4th of August, and to protect her ally, Great Britain declared war on Germany the same day. Tommy Boyle and his teammates returned to Turf Moor for pre-season training the following day. Burnley's reserve team trainer, Charlie Bates, an army reservist, along with players Sam Gunton and Alf Lorimer, were among the first to be called up. To hundreds of young men, the prospect of war offered excitement and a great adventure with their mates. They'd go to France and sort the Germans out, and it would all be over by Christmas. On September 12th, the Mayor of Accrington, John Harwood, appealed for men over the age of 18 to join a local volunteer battalion. One company of the new battalion was raised in Burnley, and Henry Davison Riley, leader of Burnley Lads Club, managed to recruit over 100 members to the cause. The battalion became known as the Accrington Pals. The Football League season returned on the 5th of September, Burnley suffering a home defeat to Bradford City, but after that the Clarets won 3 games to go 6th. Crowds were well down, only 14,000 turning out for the Everton match, the terraces populated mainly by men in khaki. Tommy Boyle and his colleagues soon faced calls to join the ranks, mostly through the news media, and volunteer battalions were set up to appeal directly to footballers and other sportsmen. In early October, it was Burnley's FA Cup goal scorer Bert Freeman's birthday, and the players went out to celebrate. Bert and Tommy shared the same digs in Stonyholm, but in the middle of the night, Bert was awakened, smelling gas. He found Tommy unconscious. A gas light tap was left open. Bert smashed the windows to let the gas escape and went to find a doctor. When he returned, Tommy had come round. Both of them had had a very lucky escape. By early December, it was clear that the war wouldn't be over by Christmas. Both sides had dug in, and a war of attrition had begun. Just before Christmas, the local press reported that the Burnley players were all taking part in army training, with drill and marching practice exercises at Turf Moor. In January 1915, Burnley began their defence of the FA Cup. They beat Huddersfield Town 3-1 at Turf Moor, and then thumped Southend United 6-0 at home in the second round. The Clarets travelled to Burnden Park in round 3, only to lose 2-1 to Bolton Wanderers after extra time. Burnley finished the season in 4th place, 3 points behind champions Everton. The Clarets finishing with a 9-game unbeaten run, their best finish since 1894. The Football League season ended in April, and from then on professional football was suspended. With no income, the players had to seek employment in munitions factories, or were increasingly encouraged to join the ranks, though conscription was still some months away. Competitive football would continue, with regional leagues set up to reduce the teams travelling around the country. Players could be paid a maximum of £1 a week for travel and subsistence. The Lancashire League began with 14 teams. Players were free to play for other clubs, Burnley signing players from Blackburn Rovers, while losing players like Bert Freeman, Ronnie Sewell and Jimmy Lindsay to other clubs. In January 1916, the Military Service Act was passed by Parliament, which enforced single men between 18 and 41 to join the ranks. Tommy Boyle joined up with the Royal Field Artillery at Burnley Barracks on the 4th of March 1916. Bob Kelly joined him, along with Low Cook and Bill Kellock. Tommy became 118158 Gunner Boyle. He was soon promoted to Bombardier, earning a stripe on his sleeve. The Lancashire League season ended in April, Burnley a creditable second, behind winners Manchester City. Tommy and winger Eddie Mosscrop represented an England Army 11 on the 13th of May at Goodison Park, England beating the Scots 4-3, with Mosscrop scoring the winning goal. Saturday the 1st of July, and the start of the Wakes Week's holidays. And from 7 o'clock in the morning, scores of mill workers set out for a week at the seaside. In France, the Allied offensive began in the Somme region. Over 100,000 men from the newly formed volunteer PALS battalions waited nervously for the signal to go over the top. Tommy's brother, John Boyle, serving with the Barnsley PALS, was one of them. Further up the line were the Accringtons, including the Burnley company led by Captain Henry Riley. At 7:30 they fixed bayonets, and the officers' whistles blew, and they went over the top. Within minutes, thousands of them were felled by the German machine gun fire, scythed down like wheat in the morning breeze. John Boyle was hit twice in the legs. Accrington PALS Sergeant Ernie Kay, who would later become chairman of Burnley FC, was shot 3 times, but managed to make it back through no man's land. Henry Davison Riley was shot in the head only minutes after leaving his trench and died instantly. The Accringtons began with 720 men and suffered 594 casualties. By nightfall, more than half the 100 battalions that started the day were lost. The national newspapers played down the slaughter on the Somme, but not the local papers, which were filled with the obituaries of the fallen from towns like Accrington, Barnsley and Burnley. As the 1916-17 football season began, Tommy was waiting for his posting overseas. He was serving locally with the Royal Field Artillery, but was released from his unit to spend Saturdays on the football field. He was also busy planning a wedding. Tommy had met Annie Varley in 1914, and she had accompanied him to the cup final 2 years earlier. Shortly afterwards the couple were engaged. Annie was 6 years younger and a milliner, currently making army uniforms. The week after his wedding, Tommy was posted overseas and arrived in Ypres in the middle of March 1917. He wrote to John Howarth, the Burnley secretary, that Bob Kelly's unit had been engaged in the fighting and his unit was going up the line soon. The 1917 summer offensive began on the 30th of May, with Tommy's gun crew engaged in the massive artillery bombardment of Passchendaele. The bombardment went on for a week, day and night. It was a diversion that was to take place at Messines Ridge to the south. On the 6th of June, a number of mines would be detonated beneath the German positions to knock the 10,000 German defenders off the ridge. The artillery barrage stopped at 3:08 a.m. Everything fell silent. Then at 3:10, 19 of the mines were exploded simultaneously. The noise was so loud, Prime Minister Lloyd George heard it in London. One duty of artillery crews was to crawl out to no man's land with a field telephone and report on the gun's fall of shot. Bombardier Tommy Boyle and 2 of his crew were engaged on the 1st of August. A shell burst above their position, spraying shrapnel in all directions. Tommy was hit, metal shards cutting through his webbing. He was deaf, blood trickled down his face, but worse was the shrapnel wound in his thigh. His 2 colleagues had been hit as well, but only scratched. They had to get Tommy out of their shell hole and to a first aid post quickly, before infection set in, or he could lose a leg. They would have to cross no man's land in the dark, quietly, or German snipers would pick them off. It took what seemed hours, but they finally managed it. Tommy had his wounds cleaned and dressed. A 2-inch piece of shrapnel was removed from his thigh. 2 days later he was transferred to Rouen, and from there an ambulance train to London. From London he was transferred to Northumberland War Hospital, Gosforth, where he had an operation to repair his hearing. The Burnley Express reported on Tommy's progress on the 8th of August, and Annie spent the remainder of the summer in the northeast to be close to her husband. By January 1918, Tommy was back in Burnley. Burnley secretary John Howarth called round to see how he was. Tommy was itching to kick a ball again, and borrowed a ball from the club to practice with on the local recreation ground. Tommy made his Burnley comeback on the 9th of March 1918 in a match against Stockport County at Turf Moor. Burnley lost 2-0, but Tommy had managed to last the full game. The following week, Tommy received a letter asking him to report to the town hall for a medical. He couldn't believe it. They passed him fit for service, and he was posted back to France with the Army Service Corps. The football season ended in early April 1918, Burnley's worst season ever on record. 82 players had played for the Clarets, including 15 goalkeepers. Burnley finished next to bottom of the league, and the defence having let in a record 100 goals. With the Americans now fighting in France, the Allied armies supported by tanks broke through the enemy's lines at Amiens in August, the Germans retreating, and on November the 11th the 4 years of fighting came to an end. The boys slowly started to come home, but like many of his fellow teammates serving all over the globe, Tommy Boyle didn't return home until March 1919. Burnley had lost so many young men during the conflict. The roll of honour ran to thousands of names. Families suffered as many as 4 sons, 3 brothers, fathers and sons. At Turf Moor, Burnley Football Club lost 6 of its own, including forward Teddy Hodgson, who scored so many goals on Burnley's road to the FA Cup. Many players had been wounded, and many more mentally traumatised. In August 1919, league football returned and picked up where it had left off in 1915. The Burnley players trained hard, and crowds returned to Turf Moor to see a group of new faces that had arrived. Forward Joe Anderson signed from Clydebank, and winger Benny Cross from local side Runcorn. Bob Kelly became a regular in the forward line. New defenders Alf Basnett, Len Smelt, Cliff Jones and Walter Weaver, with regulars Jerry Dawson in goal and the half-back line of Halley, Boyle and Watson, the new-look Burnley began the 1919-20 season in good spirits. Burnley started the season slowly, with only 1 win in their first 4. An away victory over Liverpool, followed by wins over Manchester United and neighbours City, saw Burnley in their best form since before the war. Then they met Bradford at Turf Moor and crashed 6-2. The away fixture at Bradford on the 29th of November put the Clarets top of the league, over West Bromwich Albion by a single point. A loss at Oldham Athletic the following week knocked Burnley off top spot, injuries forcing several team changes. A good Christmas period saw Burnley maintain second position, but the high-scoring Baggies outscored and outpointed them at every game. The decider would be the Burnley v West Brom fixtures in March. Burnley lost 4-1 at the Hawthorns and could only draw 2-2 at Turf Moor. West Brom went on to win the league with games to spare, but Burnley finished in second place, their best ever position in the league. Burnley had come close, but second place was not enough. Tommy had now turned 34 and knew his playing days wouldn't last forever. He was a regular visitor to team trainer Charlie Bates's massage table. For Tommy, next season would have to be one last effort to win the league. In August, the players reported for pre-season training. The team that finished last season was still together. Burnley started the season at home to Bradford City. 1 minute into the match, the referee ordered the home team to change their jerseys, which clashed with their visitors' chocolate and yellow. Burnley turned out in white shirts with blue sleeves. It was a bad omen. Bradford scored 4 goals in the first half. Tommy picked up a bad knock, and in the end it was Burnley 1, Bradford City 4. Tommy missed the next 2 games, Burnley losing to Huddersfield and Bradford away. After 3 games, Burnley were bottom of the league. But Tommy returned for the Huddersfield home game at Turf Moor. Burnley returned to their old selves and ran out 3-0 winners. The following week, Burnley beat Middlesbrough 2-1 at Turf Moor, and again the following week at Ayresome Park, and were now off the bottom of the league. Burnley's winning streak continued. After wins against Bradford Park Avenue at home, the Clarets travelled to London to meet Spurs. The cameras were present to record the occasion, Burnley winning 2-1 with 2 goals for Joe Anderson to go 8 games unbeaten. Burnley beat Tottenham again the following week at Turf Moor. The team travelled to Newcastle and won 2-1, before the home fixture where they won again 3-1. On the 13th of November, Burnley were top of the league, with 11 games unbeaten. Burnley's excellent form continued through the busy Christmas fixtures. In the New Year's Day derby against Preston North End, Burnley won 3-0 at Deepdale. The following week saw Burnley take on local rivals Blackburn Rovers at Turf Moor, Burnley winning 4-1 with Tommy amongst the goals. In the FA Cup, Burnley thumped 2nd Division Leicester City 7-3 at Filbert Street, Joe Anderson scoring 4 goals. And in the second round, Queen's Park Rangers were dispatched 4-2 at Turf Moor, Burnley looking good for the double. Back in league action, Burnley put 7 goals past Aston Villa at Turf Moor, Joe Anderson scoring 5 of the goals, making it 25 in all competitions. The Clarets could do nothing wrong, and were unbeaten since September. Then came a reality check. In the 3rd round of the Cup, Burnley travelled to Anlaby Road to meet 2nd Division Hull City. Burnley clear favourites to go through. George Halley was injured, and Billy Nesbitt filled in at half-back. A tactical Hull City dominated the game from the first whistle, and in the end ran out 3-0 winners, and Burnley's hope of a league and cup double had gone. Burnley concentrated their attention on the league. The unbeaten run continued. Home wins over Derby County, Bolton Wanderers and Arsenal extended the record to 15 straight home victories. The busy Easter period arrived, with Burnley facing the 2 Manchester clubs home and away. On Good Friday, Burnley beat Manchester United 1-0 at Turf Moor to make it 30 games unbeaten in the league, a new record. The following day, the Clarets travelled to Hyde Road to face Manchester City. The gates were closed before kick-off with over 50,000 inside. Fans broke down the gates. As the game kicked off, a fire started in the press stand, but the game continued. City scored on 5 minutes. Tommy then missed a penalty for Burnley. And in the second half, City scored twice and finally ran out winners 3-0. The Clarets' unbeaten run had finally come to an end. On Easter Monday, Burnley got back on track, beating Manchester United 3-0 at Old Trafford. The Manchester City return fixture took place on the 2nd of April. City took an early lead, but Burnley fought back to score 2 goals in 2 minutes. The Clarets going 9 points clear at the top of the league with 6 games left. Burnley could win the league if they could beat last year's champions West Bromwich Albion. West Brom took the lead on 27 minutes, and Burnley equalised through Bob Kelly 4 minutes from the end of the game. Another point won. On to Goodison Park to meet Everton, where 40,000 turned out on the 23rd of April. Fazakerley put Everton in front on the quarter hour, but Burnley equalised 3 minutes later through Benny Cross, 1-1 at the final whistle. The Burnley players eagerly awaited the score from Burnden Park, where Bolton were playing second place Liverpool. At 5 o'clock, the telephone rang and gave the scoreline. Bolton had beaten Liverpool 1-0. It meant the Clarets were 7 points clear at the top, with 3 games left, and no one could catch them. And Burnley were league champions. In the Clarets' final match of the season against Sunderland at Turf Moor on May 7th, Tommy Boyle was presented with the League Championship trophy by John McKenna, President of the Football League. As recognition of the team's 30-game unbeaten run, Burnley asked the FA if they could give each of the 11 players, Dawson, Smelton Jones, Halley Boyle and Watson, Nesbitt, Kelly, Anderson, Cross and Weaver, a sum of £25 each as a reward for achieving such a record. The FA rejected it and granted a maximum of 5 guineas each, just £5 and 5 shillings. Championship medals went to 11 players, along with Secretary John Howarth and trainer Charlie Bates, but later Eddie Moscrop, Dave Taylor and Alf Basnett were awarded medals. Later, Tommy and all the players were presented with gold engraved pocket watches by the club. They had gone 30 games unbeaten, of which 17 were straight home victories. And Burnley's home gates had netted £34,000. Total attendances over the season at Turf Moor had reached 690,000. On the 16th of May, Burnley travelled to London to meet Tottenham Hotspur for the Charity Shield. Spurs had won the FA Cup, and it was the first time league champions played FA Cup winners. Lots had been drawn before the match to host a game, and Spurs had won. Spurs, with home advantage, scored 2 early goals, and Tommy remonstrated with the referee over the second one, claiming offside, which later earned him a misconduct censure from the FA. Spurs won the game 2-0. The Charity Shield was awarded to the Spurs captain, and medals were awarded to all the players, Tommy later handing his gold medal to his sister. Over the summer months, Tommy hadn't signed his contract and was waiting to find out if he had been granted a second benefit match. He was also about to become a father. The new season beckoned, and the players were all back in training. Annie gave birth to a baby girl on the 10th of August, and the couple named her Decima Betty Boyle. 5 games into the new season, Burnley were back at the top of the table and were looking like they would repeat their form of the previous season. The worldwide influenza outbreak hit the first team in November, and Tommy missed 3 games. Burnley suffered heavy defeats and Liverpool took over at the top. The Clarets returned to the top, winning their home games, but they were losing away and eventually lost the top spot. A good Christmas period was followed by a poor January and February that saw Burnley lose and draw. Then a win at Bolton put them back in second place. At the start of January 1922, Tommy became the licensee of the Pedestrian Inn, a beer house in the centre of town. Now 36, he was clearly planning for his family's future after his playing days came to an end. Arsenal were visitors on Monday the 20th of February 1922. Only 12,000 turned out for the midweek afternoon match. Burnley won 1-0 with a Bob Kelly goal. Billy Nesbitt received a bad cut to his knee, and Tommy also picked up a knee injury. He hobbled off the field at one stage but returned, sticking it out until the end. Doc Hodges was a busy man at the end of the game. Tommy's knee had swollen up. He'd had leg injuries before, but not so bad. Fluid built up on the knee, and his leg was strapped up for a fortnight. He didn't know it, but he had played his final first-team game for Burnley. New signing Billy Emerson came in at left-back, and Alf Basnett switched to Tommy's centre-half position. Burnley won their next 2 games against Bolton and Oldham. But after that the Clarets lost 3 out of 4. Tommy meanwhile was stuck in the pub all day, unable to move around, and his baby daughter was also ill. On the 25th of March, Burnley were playing away at Cardiff. At Turf Moor, the FA Cup semi-final between Huddersfield Town and Notts County kicked off at 3 p.m. The magistrates had given pubs permission to open their doors at 10 o'clock to cater for the huge crowds. But the doors of the Pedestrian Inn were closed. A sign in the window read, "Closed for bereavement." During the night, Tommy had telephoned for Dr. Holden as baby Decima's condition worsened. Dr. Holden did all he could, but he couldn't save the child who died of pneumonia. She was 6 months old. Tommy and Annie were not seen for several days. Burnley lost 3 of their last 4 league matches, and Liverpool took the league title with the Clarets finishing 3rd. Burnley players and officials travelled to Italy for a 2-week break, playing Liverpool and several local sides, but with a pub to run, Tommy didn't go. It was later announced that he was to retire from first-team football, but would be engaged as a player coach. When fit, he would be available for selection for the reserves and the new A-team. In August, the players returned to Turf Moor, and Coach Boyle was engaged in putting the players through their paces before the season began. New terracing had been built on the Beole end, and Stephen Sims was signed from Bristol Rovers as Tommy's replacement at centre-half. Burnley began the new season with a 3-0 victory over West Bromwich Albion, and Tommy turned out for the A-team. The A's were made up of local youngsters, trialists and professionals getting back to match fitness. Boyle's Burnley A's beating Blackburn Rovers A's 5-1 at Lower House Mills playing fields. Without their influential captain, Burnley struggled, finishing the season in 15th place, just 8 points from the bottom. Tommy made 16 appearances for the reserves and A-team, and his last match for the A's saw Burnley win the North East Lancashire League as they beat Barnoldswick Town. Tommy was given a free transfer, and his 12 years at Burnley came to a close. He still felt fit, and if he couldn't run as fast as he did 20 years before, he could still play. Tommy answered an advert in the Athletics News for players wanted at Wrexham. He was signed on as player coach and went straight into the Wrexham first team at his familiar position of centre-half. Wrexham started the 1923-4 season well, and after 7 games they were top of the 3rd Division North, having lost only once. It was the highest league position the Red Dragons had ever been. Away from football, Tommy was in trouble with the law. During the summer, the police found the licensee of the Pedestrian Inn selling alcohol after closing hours. Tommy claimed he hadn't taken any money, and the people present were his invited guests. The case went to the Quarter Assizes before a jury, and witnesses were called. He lost the case and was fined £10 plus costs, which would have been more than the fine. Tommy's troubles mounted. Back at Wrexham, it's not known why, but he was suspended after refusing to play for the reserves, pending a hearing with the board. His contract was later terminated. With no income and the brewery on his back, Tommy and Annie handed back the licence of the Pedestrian Inn, and by Christmas 1923 the couple had left Burnley. They moved to Blackpool, where Tommy's sister, Margaret Ellen, had a boarding house. Out of work, Tommy applied for several coaching posts. There was the possibility of coaching in America. He was linked with the vacant manager's post at Aberdare, but finally signed a contract with Berlin club Tennis Borussia. Annie went with him, but soon got homesick and later returned to England. Tommy coached in Berlin until June 1925. He returned to England in the summer, only to find that Annie had left him. He searched for her everywhere, but to no avail. Tommy stayed in Blackpool, taking part in the bowling competitions, playing for money. With no trade, he found work in Blackpool, working as a labourer on building sites. In 1931, Tommy was clearly unwell. He had been in trouble with the law on 3 occasions, for fighting, being drunk and disorderly, and not paying a taxi fare. He managed to keep in touch with Burnley and visited Turf Moor a few times to watch the Clarets. By 1930, Burnley had been relegated, and the great side he had been such an influence on was now mid-table in Division 2, playing to average gates of 10,000. Tommy's last public appearance was in Burnley on the 28th of January 1932, at the launch of the new Burnley Supporters Club at Salem Chapel. A huge audience gathered to see the former cup winners and league champions, Mosscrop, Dawson, Halley, Boyle and Watson. It was the day before his 46th birthday. Several of the old players gave speeches, but not Tommy. He sat quietly, listening on the stage to everyone else. At the end, the players had a drink together before they each went their separate ways. 1 month later, in February 1932, Tommy was admitted to the male mental ward of Primrose Bank Hospital in Burnley for a period of assessment. After a week's observation, the Chief Medical Officer, Alexander Mayer, wrote, "On the 29th day of February 1932, I personally examined the said Thomas Boyle and came to the conclusion that he is a person of unsound mind, and the proper person to be taken charge of and detained under care and treatment. I form this conclusion on the following grounds. He has delusions. He owns 27 racehorses, sending them over to Germany to race. Won a trophy in Germany that took 2 men to carry. He has been striking other patients and staff and secreting himself around the building. Mr. Kirby, superintendent of the male mental ward, Primrose Bank, says he is very restless and violent at times, threatening and striking staff. He refuses food, is lost to his surroundings, and is always trying to escape through the windows. The said Thomas Boyle appeared to me to be in a fit condition of bodily health to be removed to a mental hospital or licensed house. I give this certificate having first read the section of the 1890 Lunacy Act of Parliament signed by Dr. William Alexander Mayer, Chief Medical Officer, 29th of February 1932. Tommy was transferred to Whittingham Mental Hospital, the former Lancashire County Lunatic Asylum, and the largest facility in England. In the 1930s, it had a population of almost 4,000 patients, men and women of all ages. Whittingham was a huge complex. It boasted its own railway station, laundry, post office, sports facilities, including football pitches. The local media made no further mention of Tommy Boyle or his whereabouts after the event on the 28th of January. For someone so popular and who was always in the newspapers, it was unusual not to hear of him. It was as if he'd been airbrushed from society. Other than an article that appeared in the Liverpool Echo a year later, in 1933, no news about Tommy Boyle appeared in the Burnley press about him being ill or in hospital or where he had gone to. 8 years later, on the 1st of January 1940, Tommy Boyle died. He was 53. He had spent the last 8 years of his life locked away in Whittingham. His family brought his body home to Hoyland in Yorkshire, to the little Catholic church of St Helens, to be placed at rest with his mother Ellen, Father Patrick and his brother John, in a family grave. In April 2010, Burnley and Barnsley football clubs jointly funded a new headstone for Tommy and the Boyle family, which has been visited by relatives and hundreds of football supporters from all over the world to pay tribute to a football legend. Several research studies into a link between professional football and dementia has found causal links between the disease and brain injuries sustained by prolonged heading of the ball. From match reports of his playing career, Tommy Boyle most probably suffered a similar fate. The Nottingham Post reported in 1935 that when training, Tommy would go out onto the pitch with 4 or 5 footballs and head each ball from the centre circle to the touchline as part of his training routine. Today, better support and medical facilities are available to players, but in the 1920s, professionals like Tommy had no support. Tommy Boyle was among football's greatest players. He was the first Burnley captain to win both FA Cup and League Championship honours. Arthur Fairclough, Boyle's former manager at Barnsley, said, "Tom Boyle, in the opinion of sound judges, was one of the best centre-halves who ever stepped onto a football field." And Harry Windle, the Burnley chairman from 1910 until 1930, said, "Tommy Boyle was the greatest player who has donned the Burnley jersey during my connection with the club."